Okay, so for this week's installment of grammar, we're going to be looking at agreement again, except this week we'll be looking at subject-verb agreement. The good thing about doing subject-verb agreement right after we've done pronoun antecedent agreement is that a lot of the same rules apply. Those weird words that are sometimes, or they're always singular, that are always plural, or can sometimes be both, apply to subject-verb agreement as well. So please remember that when we are reviewing this PowerPoint to take notes when you see the pencil. Okay, so with subject-verb agreement, we first need to know that the subject and the verb must match in number, just like with pronoun antecedent agreement. If the subject is singular, the verb is singular. So let's review quickly what a subject is and what a verb is. So a subject is who or what the sentence is about, while the verb is the word that expresses action or a state of being. So the verb is what's happening. So let's take a look at this example. The little train thought that he could. So when we look at this sentence, we can see that train is the subject because it's what the sentence is about. It's the what. And thought is the verb. So the train, which is the what, thought, which is the action. Pretty simple. But it does get more complicated. So if the subject is singular, the verb then gets an S. If the subject is plural, the verb does not take an S. So it seems like it is opposite of what you would naturally think, in my mind at least. So this chart is in your notes. It's a good way to remember and it's a good way to think. So if you're having trouble, think of the third person. Would you say he writes or he write? So if you're struggling to remember if the singular takes the S, think of it that way. He writes. Same thing with the plural. They write, not they writes. It's a good way to remember it. Same thing with the tense forms of be. He was, not he were. They were, not they was. Okay, so yeah, please write that. Take a note on that. So here are some examples. What I'd like you to do is pause the video and try these on your own, and then we'll review. So pause it. Okay, so let's go over these. The puppy wants his toy. So we know that the subject is puppy, and puppy is singular, so it takes the singular verb wants. He wants his toy. Number 2, Ms. Mayholtz miss or misses her family. So the subject is Ms. Mayholtz, I am singular, and so I take the singular verb misses. She misses her family. Okay, number 3, the girls eat or eats all they want. So the verb is girls. The subject is girls and it's plural, so it takes the plural verb eat. They eat all they want. Number 4, Hazel and Wyatt is or are my family. So the subject here, Hazel and Wyatt, and we'll discuss the and later, so Hazel and Wyatt are plural, so it takes the plural verb are. They are my family. Number 5, Hazel sing or sings very well. Hazel is the subject. She's by herself here, so she's singular and takes the singular verb sings. So please correct those if you made mistakes. All right. Something very important to remember, and which causes a lot of people to make mistakes in subject-verb agreement, is that the subject will never be found in a prepositional phrase. So some examples of prepositional phrases are in the house, on the team, of my students. Prepositional phrases are groups of words that can be taken out of a sentence and they still make sense. So let's look at an example. Prepositional phrases are usually with these words that are always singular, always plural, or sometimes singular or sometimes plural, which is what can confuse you. So we'll look at some examples so that you can see what I mean. Okay, one of the boys want or wants to stay home. So remember, the prepositional phrases you don't think about. So for the first one, the subject is one. It's not boys. So you can see that if you thought it was boys, you would make a big mistake because one is singular, but boys is plural. So since one is singular, you take the singular subject wants. So he wants to stay home. One wants to stay home. Okay, the second one. Others in the class like or likes the teacher. So the subject is others because in the class is a prepositional phrase, so we don't look at it. Others is one of those words that is plural. So they like the teacher. Plural is like. Number 3. Most of the night is or are spent sleeping. So if we refer back to our chart, we can see that most is one of those words that can either be singular or plural. So this is an interesting case because when it's like that, you have to look inside of the prepositional phrase to decide what is it going to be. So most is the subject, but it can be either. So we have to say, well, what is most referring to? Well, most in this sentence is referring to the singular night. So it's singular. Most of the night is spent sleeping. So well, let's look at the next example because it's different. So again, we have most. Most of my nights is or are spent alone. So sad. So most again is the subject, but most is one of those words that can be either singular or plural. So we have to look inside of the prepositional phrase to see what it's referring to. So in this example, most is referring to nights. And nights is plural because it has a yes. So most of my nights are spent alone. Most is referring to the plural nights, so it gets the plural are. So that's why it's important that you remember and you refer back to that chart to understand which words are always singular, which words are always plural, and which words it depends on the sentence. Because most of the time, you ignore the prepositional phrase unless it's one of those words that can be either, which is why it can be tricky. Okay, let's look at the last example. Each of the girls run or runs after school. So the subject is each, and each is always singular, so it takes the singular verb runs. She runs after school. So if you look at most of these, they can really confuse you. Like the last one, for example. If you just chose girls, you would get the subject-verb agreement incorrect because girls is plural while each is singular. So it's important to know those words. Okay. So let's look at these examples. So these examples I put on here just because they are normal subjects, not the special subjects that are sometimes singular, sometimes plural, or always singular or always plural. So take a second and pause this and do them on your own and then we'll review. All right, so the list of items is or are on the table. So here, ignoring the prepositional phrase, we know that the subject is list. List is singular, so it gets the singular subject is. The list is on the table. It is on the table. Okay, second example. The boys in the school smell or smells. So ignoring the prepositional phrase in the school, we see that the subject is boys, and we know that boys is plural, so it gets the plural verb smell. So the boys smell, they smell. Okay. So compound subjects. Compound subjects are used when you have and. And this is a pretty easy rule to know. So when there's an and in the subject, it is plural and it takes a plural verb. So for example, Mr. Kosh and Ms. Mayholtz is or are married. Well, the subject is Mr. Kosh and Ms. Mayholtz. So it's the and, so that is the entire subject. And because there's an and, we know that it's plural, and so it takes the plural verb are. Let's look at another example. The cat and the rat want or wants to be friends. So we see the and, so we see that the cat and the rat is the subject, and because it's and, we know that it's plural, and so it takes the plural verb want. So they want to be friends. Okay. On the other hand, we have subject-verb agreement with or. And or is a little trickier than and because there are special rules with or. So, when two singular subjects, and it has to be two singular subjects, are connected with or, either or neither nor, the verb is singular. So let's look at these examples. Either Michael or Nicholas is or are coming to visit. So we see that it's either or, and they're both singular, so we know that the verb is going to be singular. So he is coming to visit. Because when you say either or, you're talking about one or the other. So it's one of them. So let's look at the next example. Neither Harry nor Ron like or likes fighting. So we see the neither nor, and we see that Harry and Ron are the subjects, and they're both singular, so we know it gives the singular subject likes. Pretty easy. Last example. The apple or the orange is or are your choice for lunch. So we see the or, we see that apple is singular, and we see that orange is singular, so we know that it's a singular is. When it gets a little more challenging or difficult is when there is an either or, neither nor, or, and the two words, one is singular and one is plural. When you have that situation, the verb agrees with the subject that is closest to the verb. So let's look at the examples. Either the teacher or the students is or are going to cry. So in this example, we see either or, so we know we have to look at the two subjects, and we see that teacher is singular, but students is plural. So students is closer to the verb, and students is plural, so we choose the plural are. Okay. Next example is the exact opposite. Either the students or the teacher is or are going to cry. So it's the same sentence. We see the either or, except this time we see that the two subjects are switched. So this time, students, which is plural, is first, and teacher, which is singular, is closer to the verb. So because teacher is closer to the verb and it's singular, in this example, is the correct answer. And now let's look at the last example. The apple or the oranges is or are your choice for lunch. So we see that it's or, so we know that we have to look at the subjects as two different things, and we see that apple is singular, but oranges is plural, and oranges is closer to the verb, and it's plural, so we know that we have to choose the plural are as the correct verb. Okay, so that's it for subject-verb agreement. You're going to have examples to practice. It gets easier with practice, so I will put those on Schoology and you'll be able to do practice as well.